What's up, guys? Thanks for stopping by the shop today. My name's Danny, and in this video we're going to try to turn this funny little elm burl into something cool. Check it out. Alright, so I've got this little elm burl that I was actually able to harvest off of a dead elm tree. The tree's been dead for quite some time, so I know that this wood is quite dry. I am going to go ahead and get all of this bark and everything pulled off of it. There's just way too much going on here, and I really want to see how thick of a solid piece of wood that I actually have. So I'm going to take a chisel and probably end up with a wire wheel, get all this stuff cleaned up, and then we'll start getting it turned. So what I've noticed, now that I've got the majority of the bark removed, I noticed that while I was attempting to harvest this thing from the tree, I made some bad cuts here. So what I'm going to have to do is trim these off, and unfortunately that's going to really reduce the amount of material for this, but that's okay. I still think that there is plenty of material here to work with. With having that, I may try to keep this as natural as I can. I'm gonna have to remove quite a bit of this stuff. I don't know. I guess we'll get it spun up on here and see what happens. So one thing I am noticing on here as I kind of get this cleaned up is I do see a couple fractures here on the back. I don't know if those are going to translate to the other side or not. Hopefully they don't open up anymore. So I'll just have to keep an eye on those as we kind of move through turning this thing. I'm going to do my best to kind of keep this as natural as I can on the back. I'm probably going to have to smooth a little of this out, but I don't want to turn all of it away if I don't have to. I would like to kind of keep some of these natural undulations and whatnot in here. So I think I'm going to I would do a worm screw or a faceplate. I think I may have to turn this a little off center so I can maximize the depth of it. If that's the case, I may do a worm screw right here. That'll kind of put me in this general area on it. And it's not too terribly off center. It's definitely off center, but it's not too bad. We'll try that because I know I'm going to lose some of this material here just because I was a bonehead and made some bad cuts when I was trying to get this off the tree. So I think we'll go right here with it. So unfortunately, I've had a change of heart. The more that I turn this away, I'm coming to the realization that I'm not going to be happy with how it's going to turn out. And that's all due to my fault on the harvesting of this piece. With how poorly I cut this, I'm going to end up with just the tiniest bit of material here to actually work with. And with just the natural movement in the wood, I'm not going to be able to really take much advantage of what this piece has to offer just as it sits naturally. So what I believe I'm going to do, and it's possibly going to be a big mistake also, is I think I'm actually going to cast this in epoxy. I'm gonna turn this down just a little bit more and get it inside this 8-inch mold and then pour epoxy all over it and then shape it utilizing, you know, the high spots that are actually in this wood. So all my low or negative spots would be epoxy, and then the inside of this would just be all of the natural wood. You're not going to see a bunch of epoxy on the inside of it. So I think I'm going to go that route, just so that way I can maximize the material. Again, it could be a mistake, but I believe it actually is a mistake if I were to just go at it the way that it is. I think I would just be wasting this piece of wood, and that would just be, you know, a disaster. I don't know about a disaster, but it'd be a shame for sure. So I'm going to turn this down just a little bit more to where it'll actually fit inside the mold, and then we're going to prep for pouring epoxy on it. I think that's the way to go. We have gotten this thing all prepped up. It's nice and clean. We did end up with a few voids here on this side. I was able to get those picked out with the little, what is it, O-ring and gasket removal tool that I have. So we've got this thing cleaned up, ready to go. So we're just going to set this thing off to the side for now. It's going to end up in this mold, so that'll actually fit in there quite nicely, and then all this negative space will all get filled in with epoxy. We are using the Let's Resin epoxy. This is the 1 gallon kit. I've used it in a previous video. I was pleased with the outcome in that one, in that little test that we did. So now it's time to give it a legit larger pour test. This is a 1-to-1 mixture ratio. So I'm going to get this figured out. Alright, let's get our pigment in there. So for the pigment we're going to be using, what do they call it? Spring green. My wife really likes the color of this one, so we're going to go with that one. No idea how much this stuff to use. So that was 5 of these little scoops. Try that and see what it looks like. It's a pretty light color. I don't know if I can add any more and it really make a difference. I'm hoping it's not going to be too light of a color. Okay, well, that's thoroughly mixed. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let this thing off gas for a little bit, get those bubbles out of it before pouring it in the mold and then getting it in the pressure pot. So while that is getting the bubbles out, I will go ahead and get our mold prepped. I'll be using the tried and true, or at least for me, tried and true method of my paste wax and see if that works. I haven't used the paste wax on this type of mold yet. The only thing I've used it on are PVC molds, so we'll see how it reacts with the silicone mold. It is about 80 degrees in the shop today, so this epoxy might want to start reacting fairly quickly. We'll find out. Okay, got a nice generous coat of our paste wax on there. And what I don't want to do is get paste wax on there where I'm going to be pouring the epoxy, so I'm actually going to take one of these gloves off to handle that piece. Get rid of what bubbles I can before introducing more. I would say that was actually about the right amount, because I got to be able to get it in the mold, or not in the mold. I got to be able to get it in the mold in the pressure pot, and this mold is a little on the flimsy side. I mean, it is just a cheap mold off Amazon. Problem now is this wants to rise up a little, so I'm gonna have to get something to set on top of it to keep that down. Ooh, this is gonna be a mess, guaranteed. So I'm hoping that this is actually going to be heavy enough. Problem is, there's not a lot of real estate. And it's going to have to balance on here, and I don't like that. That might work. Alright, so I'm going to let this thing set up for just a little bit, and I'll be popping the bubbles periodically with the blowtorch. And then I'll get this thing pressurized after, well, I don't know, 20 minutes or so, letting this thing off gas just a little bit. So I'll let this thing, stay in the pressure pot for probably 4 or 5 hours, somewhere around there. I'll check on it after that and see how it looks. So I'll see you guys back here after a little while. Okay, so it has been right at 4 hours, and it's definitely hard enough to demold. At least it appears like it is. So we're going to see how easy this thing is actually going to come out of here. So far, so good. Nice. That worked out well. That worked out really well. That's cool. That's a good color. I really like that. Very cool. Well, this thing is still just a little, it's too soft to turn. So I'm going to let this thing continue to cure for the next 24 hours or next 20 hours. And we'll get back to this thing here in the next day or so. But so far, so good. Welcome back, guys. So it's been a few days since I pulled this thing out of the mold. So this is fully cured, nice and solid. So now it's time to get our hole drilled back in here and get it reattached to our worm screw and start turning this thing into a bowl. And I'm looking forward to getting this one going. Okay, so we've got this thing roughed out, sanded. Let's get a little denatured alcohol on it. Get the outside of it cleaned off here. Get our first peek at what it might look like. Very nice. Very nice. Epoxy's got some nice deep color to it, nice movement. The elm is just beautiful with all the wood grain pattern in it. That's excellent. I did sand this up to 400, which should be plenty. We'll get a finish on this and then get it flipped around, start hollowing it out. I did run into a bit of an issue here. It's pretty hollow, so I tried to reinforce it with some thin CA glue. Hopefully it'll hold on enough, we're gonna find out, for me to flip this thing around. Hopefully that doesn't all backfire on me. I would have done a mortise on here, but I'm afraid that I'm gonna end up hitting the worm screw. So I wanted to just go ahead and do the tenon, and I'll cut it off, and hopefully it'll be strong enough to stay on there long enough to get it hollowed out. But I'm gonna do a lacquer finish on this, so I'm gonna get this thing nice and clean, get all the dust off of it, and get a finish on it. Now that our finish has had time to dry and cure, we're going to do our final sanding on the outside with our awesome micro mesh pads, a little bit of water, and get this thing shined up looking good. got it all sanded down. Everything is up to 400. I'm going to take a little shellac sealer and just run it around the inside here. Seal up the grain just a little bit. And then I'll apply my top coat. Alright, let that alcohol evaporate. Alright, we get a couple layers of top coat on there and bring back for some final photos.